Hi there and welcome. My name is Michael Kentenich and I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer. In this video, you will learn what Microsoft Graph offers and how it facilitates the access and flow of data. Plus, you will learn how to form queries through REST API and code. With Microsoft Graph, you have a backstage pass to all your Microsoft 365 data. Connect, access and interact with data in Microsoft 365, Entra ID, Enterprise Mobility and Security Services, Windows, and more. That's the power Microsoft Graph puts in your hands. Use it for seamless integration and improved efficiency for more connected applications. Imagine your app knowing your users' preferences, schedules, and collaboration patterns. With Microsoft Graph, you can tap into rich contextual data, making your app feel like a trusted sidekick, always one step ahead. In this video, I will explain the benefits of using Microsoft Graph, how to perform operations on Microsoft Graph by using REST API and the SDKs, and how to apply best practices to help your application get the most out of Microsoft Graph. The Microsoft 365 platform has three main components that enable the data to be accessed. You can access the Microsoft Graph API through one endpoint, which is https graph.microsoft.com. You can use REST APIs or SDKs to connect to this endpoint. Microsoft Graph also has a strong set of services that handle user and device identity, access, compliance, security, and help prevent organizations from losing or leaking any data. Microsoft Graph connectors bring data from outside the Microsoft Cloud into Microsoft Graph services and all the applications associated with this to improve the Microsoft 365 experiences, such as Microsoft Search. There are connectors for many popular data sources such as Box, Google Drive, Jira, and Salesforce. Microsoft Graph Data Connect offers a range of tools to simplify, secure, and scalable transfer of Microsoft Graph data to common Azure data stores. The stored data acts as data sources for Azure deployment tools that you can use to create smart applications. Let me show you in the next demo how to use Graph Explorer and make REST API calls. In this video, I will introduce the Microsoft Graph Explorer to you. It's a nice website, a nice tool that you can look around the Microsoft Graph data that is available and also have a good understanding on how you can enable and use this in your own code, in your own applications. You can decide either to go with normal REST API calls or you use the provided SDKs, and I show you also where you get the examples from that. Now, the website is available at developer.microsoft.com, and then you go to the Graph Explorer. This is where you find this one here, and it is showing me right now a demo tenant. That is just a sample tenant. It's no real data. If you sign in using this option here, you will get access to your own profile. So based on your own identity or the user that you're connected to, you get then the data. And what that does right now, so in the top here, we have different methods that we can use. We have get, we have put, we have different other options available depending on what the API calls support. There's just one version right now, including a beta, and this is the endpoint that we are requesting. It's a certain API here called me, and that is my specific user profile, or in that case, that user profiles that is in the sample data. If you select anything from the left-hand side, you run a query. So if I just click here, you can see it's the same thing. If I want to see my email, which is just adding the messages API to this, the messages operation, I can then go ahead and run a query. The query will then return some sample data. That's, as I said, no real-time data, and you can check a couple of things in here. So first of all, you can have a look at what are the permissions that are required to do this operation. So you need read basic and mail read and read basic and even read-write. One of those will then get you access to the emails that you have sent in your profile. If you're interested in C access tokens and so on, you need to sign in. That is not something that comes with this tenant. It's just sample data. It's not real data. Other than this, you can see what's the status code on this. And then here you have a couple of different interesting pieces. So that is, of course, just normal, the response preview. So what does it look like? These are all JSON representations of data that is provided. And you can check the individual response headers. So you can see this in a nicer view. So you see which individual headers are used. And a really cool feature is that now this is just a REST API call. But here with code snippets, I can get a sample, a snippet for all these different languages. So if you want to find out how you do this in Java, the same thing, this is just what you need to integrate. Adding, of course, also the packages, the libraries of the SDK to have this available, like a graph service client, but then you have exactly the code here. You can copy paste this into your system. Other than this, there's a ton of information available in the Microsoft Graph. So just play around with this, either with a tenant example or with your real data. Every, let's say, data bucket that Microsoft Graph provides of Microsoft 365 applications or other cloud or SaaS offerings from Microsoft, they're all in here. And you can play around with this. You can even play around with different posts and get sessions. Some of them will work in the tenant, in the sample tenant. Some of them will require that you use a real tenant, but you can find this out. And also it has a link to the Graph API reference. And don't miss out on the ones on the top here. So if you're interested in learn more about the graph in general, which is much more to learn and than just we will cover in this course, you can go and have a look at trainings available either on Microsoft Learn or elsewhere. And then there's a full library of different pieces of information and training options for you. So have fun learning. The Microsoft Graph software development kits make it easier to build applications that are reliable, fast, and high quality, and that connect to Microsoft Graph. These SDKs have two parts, a service library and a core library. The service library has models and request builders that are created from Microsoft Graph metadata. They offer a robust, strongly typed, and easy to find experience when using the various datasets in Microsoft Graph. The core library offers a number of features that make it easier to work with any of the Microsoft Graph services. It has built-in support for retry handling, secure redirects, transparent authentication, and payload compression, which improve how your application interacts with Microsoft Graph without adding any complexity, and while letting you have full control over all of this. The core library also helps you with common tasks such as paging through collections and creating batch requests. The Microsoft Graph SDKs are wrappers for the MCell library, the Microsoft Authentication Library. All we talked about so far applies when using the SDK too. You have helpers that automatically acquire tokens on your behalf. They don't add complexity and give you enhanced control of your application. Let's go and see this in action. In this video, I will show you how to create a Microsoft Graph client so that you can do requests against the Microsoft Graph API to read information out of it or perform any sort of operations that the Microsoft Graph API provides. So I start off again at an app registration because, as you probably are aware, if I have a look at the API permissions for a normal, not already in any way configured other than the default app registration, it has this access to the Microsoft Graph API to read the user profile of a user that is logged in. But what we want to do now is I want to have an application that uses the Microsoft Graph Client API and it's not logging in with my credentials on behalf of my identity that I have an Entra ID. I wanted to use its own, and its own is this app registration, which has a specific application or client ID, and also this is stored in a specific tenant, and we will see these two IDs in code as well. To make this work so that it does not use my or any other user's credentials, it is not enough to just have an identity. It needs to have a secret. And that secret is already created. So I have two options here, either user certificate or a client secret, which is basically just a password that will be provided for that app registration. I created one. So when you create one, basically you just give it a name, you decide how long do you want this to be valid, then it's going to expire. And then you get a one-time only chance to see this actual value, because I cannot see this again. I need to document that somewhere. I have what I did in my code editor, so Visual Studio Code, here where my code is. I did not put it in code this time. I used .NET user secret to store this secret securely on my local machine, so I can retrieve it through a settings helper class in here, where we'll read this from the .NET user secret store. But I don't have it put in here. What I have in my code is I will load the settings, and as I said, this is a specific helper class in here where we load the settings from an app settings JSON, which is present right now, and we get the secrets from the local user storage, which is not somewhere in file, but in the app settings JSON, we have both the client ID and the tenant ID. Right? So this is how it gets access running on my local machine. Now, I want to show you the code. And what I will do in here, basically, again, this is based on a tutorial which you find on Microsoft Learn. You can do this yourself in the language of your choice. And what I will do here is I will provide, I will use two different options out of a menu. I will show you that we can retrieve an access token on behalf of that application and also list users. So if I scroll down, the first thing that I will do is display access token async. If I look at the definition of this, what it will do is it will use a graph helper class that I have provided in this sample here as well. And it uses this method get app only token. App only meaning no user involved, not my credentials, not managed identity, the app only token. And then it will print it out. But how is this defined? If we look at the class graph helper, we can see that this is using the endpoint, token request endpoint for the graph Microsoft.com URL. And then it's using this method provided by the integrated package for the graph API, get token asynchronously. And this will reach out to Microsoft Identity Platform, gather that token using the client's secret, by the way. So we have set up a context here. We need to have a way of logging in. We do this by using that endpoint, using the identity, using the secret altogether to get that token. Now, and then in the second part, I will show you how we can get a list of all the users. So we get a list of users that are in my Entra ID tenant. And again, if we look at this, how is this defined? We will basically just use this to scroll up a bit or down. We will use this to get an asynchronous request. We will query the details here of this specific user settings, and that will get us a list. The scope is defined already in the request token, and this is what I want to show you. So let's run this app, and then I will explain a few other things. So first, let's run this. Okay, so here's our menu. And the first thing is I want to just try if everything works so far and I can actually get an access token. So let's use the number 1. And what that should do is bringing me back this wall of text again, which is an access token. By the way, what that just means is that my application indeed has found or could connect and authenticate using its own identity to the Entra ID tenant. But what do I use this for? Now, you know already that we can use this now in a request to get access to resources. For example, the Microsoft Graph API to read then in the next step the users. But what is in that information stored? So what you could do, because this is really just it's an access, it's a token that is that is encrypted, or it's encoded. And if I paste it into this website jwt.ms, which you can use for debugging purposes and just troubleshooting, understand how this is all going, you can see that it is decoding this. And it lists all the different tokens in here. So you can find the name of that app registration that I have used. Then you see different IDs. You see that there's currently no token scope provided for this specific token. And also that it has a valid signature and all of that. So you can see at the different details, see if there was already a specific application error or something like that that is missing in this token, if it would not work at some point. So let's find out if it works, because now I will use the menu again and I will try to get a list of users. And then it comes back with an error message and tells me, insufficient privileges to complete the operation. Why is that? So I showed you already the reason. Maybe you can remember, but if I go back to my app registration, I showed you a secret, so that obviously it's working. If that would not be working and then the local the local app would not have that secret, it would not even be possible to get that access token. The problem here lies with the API permissions that it has right now. Because I didn't say this, but this is delegated permissions. So when we look at this, the only permission it has right now is to read a delegated, or it has a delegate permission type to read a user's profile. And that would be a user that is logged in, but there is no user logged in. So this is really not useful for me at all. So I will go and remove this. And what's missing here is a permission for the Microsoft Graph API that is not a delegated, but an application permission. So as you can see here, your application runs as a background service or daemon without a signed in user. And that is exactly our use case right now. So I will use this. Then I'll look for users. Users doesn't work, so I need to look for user. And then what I want to do now instead is I want to read all users' profile, not just the logged in user. And that's of course something risky a little bit, right? So if now I'm just playing with this and I have the permission to do this, it would be strange if someone could just go ahead and add something like that and read all the information of user profile. That does not work, because for this one, we need to have admin consent. Admin consent is required. So since I'm, by a lucky coincidence, I'm an admin here for this tenant, I can go ahead and say I would like to grant admin consent for this specific configured permissions. So I will grant that and say yes, it's okay. Now we have this application setting in here for the user profile. It also added the delegated back, but that is something you can still change in the configuration. So since I changed the permissions, I basically need to run that application once more so that I can re-authenticate. And now that I have this with the correct permissions, let's see if we now can make that call, list users, and select number 2. And here they are. Here's a list of different user IDs all coming from my tenant. Here we're just printing out the user ID, the user and its ID. Yeah, and that was an example how to use the Microsoft Graph client to get access to the Graph API to list out properties and data. But of course, you can also do this with operations, create items, and more. Your application needs to get an OAuth 2.0 access token to use the data in Microsoft Graph. You can give this token to Microsoft Graph in one of these ways: the bearer token in the HTTP authorization request header, or the Graph client constructor when using a Microsoft Graph client library. And of course, as a best practice, make use of the MCL, the Microsoft Authentication Library API, to get the access token to Microsoft Graph. When it comes to consent and authorization, only request permissions that are necessary and only when you need them. Your application should use delegated permissions if it has an interactive scenario with a signed-in user. But if your application operates without a signed-in user, such as a daemon or a background service, your application should use application permissions. Think about who will be given consent to your application, whether they are end users or administrators, and set up your application to ask for permissions in the right way. Think about handle responses effectively. Microsoft Graph may return the results of resource collection queries in several pages because of page size limits on the server side. Your application should always be prepared to deal with the responses as page data, called paging. Evolvable enums are a way that Microsoft Graph API can add new members to existing enumerations without making a breaking change for applications. A get operation only returns known members for properties of evolvable enum types by default, and your application only needs to deal with the known members. If you want your application to deal with unknown members as well, you can choose to get those members by using an HTTP prefer request header. When it comes to storing data locally, the preferred way to use Microsoft Graph is to fetch data as needed in real time. You should only cache or store data locally if it is essential for a specific scenario, and it conforms to your terms of use and privacy policy, and it doesn't break the Microsoft API's terms of use. Your application should also have appropriate policies for keeping and deleting data. In this video, I explained the benefits of using Microsoft Graph. We talked about performing operations on the Microsoft Graph by using REST API and the SDKs. And we talked about applying best practices to help your applications get the most out of the Microsoft Graph. Congratulations on understanding Microsoft Graph and its capabilities for data access and query formation. By leveraging REST API and code, you are empowered to seamlessly retrieve and manipulate data across Microsoft services. With Microsoft Graph, streamline your data workflows and unlock new possibilities for data integration and analysis in your applications. Thanks for watching. Keep on learning.